Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I'm your host, the Wilder historian, Dr. Lucas Wilder. And last week I finished with William Hardy's biography, and the Patreon members voted for me to cover the life of John A. Logan next. If you haven't heard much about Logan, he was a key figure in the Western theater of the Civil War, particularly in the siege of Vicksburg and the Atlanta Campaign. But he was also an influential politician. In this biography, I will dive into that aspect of his life. If you'd like to vote on the next general to be covered, join the Patreon page. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. Join the Patreon page and purchase something from one of my online stores. Every little bit helps. Thank you. Illinois is shaped like a giant flint arrowhead, its point thrust deep into the south between the Mississippi and Ohio rivers. At its tip, the two rivers merge in a great confluence. Here, north and south meet, and in the triangle of land at the arrowhead's point called Egypt, the customs and ideas of north and south were interwoven. John A. Logan was a product of this sectional intermingling. As historian James Pickett Jones explained in that quote, "One can't understand the life of John A. Logan without understanding where he came from. That can be said about most, if not all, historical figures, but it becomes even more so with Logan as the state of Illinois was split over the American Civil War, nearly as badly as the whole country. Logan embodied the mindset of many Northerners, especially those from Illinois. Dr. John Logan came to the United States with his family in the first decade of the 19th century, settling in Maryland. However, he and others moved west, across the Mississippi River, settling in Perry County, Missouri. Although Dr. Logan engaged in various ventures in business, agriculture, and politics, he never left the medical field that his father taught him. In 1824, Dr. Logan moved back across the Mississippi River into Illinois, settling in Brownsville. There he met Elizabeth Jenkins, a woman born in North Carolina, living at times in South Carolina and Tennessee before traveling to southern Illinois, also known as Egypt. They married and moved up the Big Muddy River to a 160-acre farm and began their family. Their first child was named John Alexander Logan, born on February 9th, 1826. He would be one of 11 children. Young Logan was born into a family of Jacksonian Democrats. His father dabbled in politics, with his uncle Alexander becoming lieutenant governor of Illinois. Young Logan's house was filled with Jacksonian ideals that his father espoused, and he undoubtedly heard many political discussions within the house's four walls, even attending some political rallies when his father ran for state assembly. Logan was educated in the town of Brownsville, with classes being held in the courthouse. However, his schooling was intermittent, because his father would win a seat in the state assembly in 1836, and that meant Logan, being the oldest child, would need to take on some responsibilities around the farm, which he did. He did, however, find time to float his homemade flatboat down the Big Muddy River, learned how to play the fiddle, and became one of the best riders in the area. One neighbor recalled, "John in his early life became an expert rider and was ever ready to ride a race. I have witnessed races at the Logan tracks many times when John, as a boy, was a rider of one of the horses and never saw him excelled." One day, Logan's father gave him orders to run the squirrels out of the corn. In a playful yet dutiful way, Logan posted a sign on a nearby tree that read, "I give notice to all squirrels to keep out of the cornfield. If they don't keep out, they will be shot." Dr. Logan attempted to supplement his child's education by teaching him himself, Dr. Logan being a well-educated man. But by the time Logan turned 16, his father realized that he needed a much more advanced schooling and sent him to nearby Randolph County to the Shiloh Academy. He and his 14-year-old brother would stay there for 3 years, learning reading, writing, arithmetic, and getting their first lessons in Latin. Logan began to demonstrate a natural ability at public speaking at Shiloh Academy as well. Logan, many years later, remembered the non-scholastic time he had at the academy. "I well remember in my boyhood days when the same number of men and boys at my college would have been a terror to all hen coops, melon patches, apple and peach orchards, without a picket fence, shotgun, and bulldogs." In 1845, Dr. Logan brought his 2 sons back home and hired a private tutor for the family to teach the growing number of children. The next year, a war with Mexico seemed certain, and Logan's father, being a war Democrat, was elected to the state assembly. Logan desperately wanted to join the approaching war, but had to wait until 1847 when his father returned from Springfield. The 21-year-old Logan enlisted and in the company elections the lieutenancy came down to himself and James Provost. Logan challenged Provost to a foot race, a card game, or a fistfight to find out who would become the first lieutenant, but a formal election saw Logan become the second lieutenant of the company. He would be a part of the 1st Illinois Infantry Regiment. On June 14th, orders came for the regiment to move. They marched to steamboats destined for Fort Leavenworth. There the regiment settled into camp life, monotonous camp life. One of his friends wrote, "The captain takes but little responsibility upon himself, which makes the other boys from different counties so hopeless in trying to do anything or make any kind of a show. But I hope the day is not far distant when John will be captain of the company, for he justly deserves the station. If John Logan was out of the company, I would pray to be at home, but he is the same John here that he is at home. He has nothing, but if I need it, I get a share, and that without a murmur." On July 7th, the regiment got the orders to march to Santa Fe and occupy that location. The march began through the Kansas prairie land and into more arid terrain. By September 7th, they spotted their first town in a month, Las Vegas, not far from Santa Fe. Their occupation of Santa Fe mimicked their duty at Fort Leavenworth. In October, the colonel of the regiment took half of the unit to El Paso, but Logan was not among them. He was now adjutant of the post and got added responsibilities. He also busied himself by studying Spanish, something that would stay with him for most of his life. In the winter of 1847, a measles outbreak infected the garrison. With Logan contracting the illness, 9 of his comrades in Company H died, but he eventually recovered by the spring of 1848. That year also brought the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo that ended the Mexican War. In July, the 1st Illinois was ordered back to their state. By September, they reached Fort Leavenworth, and by October, they were back at Alton, Illinois, where their military experience began. Upon his return, Logan expressed a want to enter politics, even though his father wanted him to be in the medical field. In 1849, Logan easily won election to county clerk. He used the money he got from being county clerk to enter law school in 1850. He traveled to Louisville University, one of the best frontier law schools. In February 1851, he graduated and wrote to his father, "You can tell all who are anxious for my attendance at our court that I am certain to be there if life lasts and money holds out." Upon his return, he ran for prosecuting attorney of the 3rd Judicial District, which he won. At the age of 25, he began his law career, moving to Benton, Illinois in Franklin County. He would only hold the position for a year, resigning to run for the State General Assembly like his father. In 1852, he began campaigning. However, his appearance did attract some accusations. His straight black hair and dark complexion led many to claim that he had Indian ancestry, and this accusation would persist throughout his life. He was a playful politician, at one point to instigate a wrestling match between himself and the town's children. While the children were playing marbles, he walked by and kindly kicked some of the marbles out of the ring. The children chased after him, knocked his hat off, and a good-hearted rumble ensued. He was a natural speaker. One of his biographers explains, "Beginning at Shiloh Academy, Logan developed an oratorical style. His voice was sonorous and audible, even to the last ranks of a large crowd, so powerful, in fact, that he was able to shout down hecklers, a quality necessary in the rough and tumble of Egyptian politics." Logan's political platform was based upon his Jacksonian Democratic upbringing and appealed to voters in southern Illinois. He was anti-black, saying that he would fight for a bill that would exclude free blacks from Illinois. He wanted enforcement of the Fugitive Slave Act. He also supported a railroad policy that would benefit St. Louis and subsequently Egypt, rather than a state policy that he felt benefited central and northern Illinois. At the age of 26, Logan was elected with a large majority, expanding his political career beyond southern Illinois. He traveled to Springfield to take his place in the Assembly in 1853. He was joined by 58 other Democrats, 16 Whigs, and 1 Free Soiler. The Assembly put Logan family friend Stephen A. Douglas in as senator, and placed Logan in 2 committees, the Judiciary Committee and the Committee on Banks and Corporations. During this session of the Assembly, Logan did as he promised and fought against a state policy regarding railroads, and wanted a railroad focused on the southern end of the state. He failed in his fight, a fight that had been raging in Illinois for years. He fought against a prohibition bill that would outlaw alcohol, because, as he said, Egypt was a place where the use of intoxicating drinks seems more natural than the use of water. However, the most significant and most hotly debated bill was one introduced by Logan himself, the Exclusion Bill that would prevent free blacks from entering Illinois. His support of this bill and his eloquent speeches made him the spokesman of Egypt. When he spoke, people saw him as representing the whole section of the state, but this did come with some problems. Not all were in favor of such a bill. The state constitution already prevented blacks from voting and joining the militia, and a provision did stop the immigration of free blacks into the state, but that provision had been ignored. Logan brought it up again. The debate for the bill began in February, with Logan standing and calling those who opposed the bill abolitionists, and alleging that if the bill did not pass, it would result in intermarriage and social and political equality. He claimed that being surrounded by slave states meant that his section of the state would be impacted most by black immigration, alleging that it would reduce the morals of the area. In an address to the assembly, he stated, "Nor can I understand how it is that men can become so fanatical in their notions as to forget that they are white. It has almost become an offense to be a white man. Unfortunate were these gentlemen in their birth that they could not have been ushered into existence with black skin." The bill passed 45 to 23, making it a crime punishable by a $100 fine for an African American to enter the state, and if they didn't leave the state or couldn't pay the fine, then they could be arrested and forced to work off the fine and trial costs. Although it is debated as to how well enforced it was, there are cases of African Americans being arrested under this Logan law. The session ended with Logan being known throughout the state. He returned to Benton to resume his law practice, but was called to Murfreesboro because his father was dying of an abscessed liver. His father soon passed, and Logan was morose. The bond between father and son was strong, and Dr. Logan's support had put Logan into the position he now found himself. Logan's raised status and name value brought lots of business to his law practice. One of his most famous court cases involved a murder trial of a prominent Union County citizen. Logan defended the citizen. Sensing that the courtroom was too hostile toward his client, he got a change of venue. The new courthouse sat in a field of sheep. When Logan was delivering his summation, a dog chased a sheep into the courtroom. The quick-thinking Logan grabbed the sheep to rescue it from the dog, and holding the animal in his arms, likened his client to the sacrificial lamb of the Old Testament. Logan was convincing, and his client was found not guilty. Logan soon ran for prosecuting attorney for the 3rd District Court, which would expand his influence over Egypt. He rode the circuit and loved every minute of it. Being in a courtroom allowed him to tell stories and hone his public speaking abilities. When Stephen A. Douglas returned to Illinois from his stint in Washington, Logan was on stage with him, sitting behind the little giant, as the senator spoke about popular sovereignty and the Kansas-Nebraska Act. Logan supported Douglas and the act. Riding around the 3rd District, he loved visiting Shawneetown, the county seat of Gallatin County. His old friend from the Mexican War, John Cunningham, was there as the registrar of the Shawneetown Land Office. Logan reminded Cunningham that he had promised Logan his daughter in marriage, but it had just been a joke because his daughter was just 8, but now she was 17 and in school in Morganfield, Kentucky. When she came home, her father introduced Mary to Logan, and it seems as though Logan fell in love with her instantly. From June until November, Logan made regular trips to spend weekends with her. Although she was first uncertain about marrying Logan, Mary accepted his proposal, and they were to be wed on November 27, 1855. It was a small wedding, and the two were married by Logan's old law partner, Judge Parrish, with only a few friends in attendance. At first, Mary accompanied Logan on the circuit rides around the district, even reading law reports, and helped him with his paperwork. However, in early 1856, she found out she was pregnant and had to refrain from joining her husband on the strenuous trips. 1856 was a big year for Logan because of his status within the Democratic Party in southern Illinois. He had to build support for Stephen Douglas to become president. Douglas didn't win the nomination, but that didn't stop Logan from supporting James Buchanan as president and John C. Breckinridge as vice president. Logan helped campaign for Buchanan as president and for himself as a member of the state assembly. Both won their elections. At the end of 1856, the Logans brought their first child into the world, named John Cunningham Logan. William Bissell was elected governor of Illinois in that same election, an election that saw him go against the Democratic platform for supporting the expansion of slavery through popular sovereignty. Bissell had been a Democrat, but switched to the Republicans during the debate over Kansas and Nebraska. The Democrats in the Assembly saw him as a traitor, and when the session began, they sought an orator to attack the new governor. They chose Logan. He said, "This, sir, is my home. Beneath the green and hallowed sod of this beautiful prairie state lie the bones of my aged and venerable father. Shall I stand quietly by as one of the people's representatives and see her public morals corrupted, her constitution violated, her honor tarnished, and give no sound of alarm?" Other than attack the new governor, Logan's time in the Assembly was fairly uneventful. He returned to his law practice and took part in the case for which he is most remembered. In Shawneetown, the Democratic Party was broken into factions, and Colonel James Slough was in a heated feud with other Democrats over the issue of slavery. When the other faction, led by John E. Hall, published an editorial bashing Slough, the feud picked up steam. Slough's son, Robert, returned from West Point to find his father lambasted by the newspaper, the Marion Intelligencer. Robert approached Hall and another Democrat named Bob Ingersoll and shot Hall dead. Robert didn't attempt to escape and remained there until the authorities arrested him. The prosecution hired Logan. Logan's mind wasn't entirely on the case. He had to leave his sick wife, and his child would become sick during the trial. At first, he had high hopes, but in August he confessed, "The defense have got 4 abolition doctors here from the North who are going to swear that he is crazy as a bedbug, and God knows what effect it will have on the case." Slough pleaded temporary insanity and was acquitted on all charges, being one of the first acquittals based on insanity in the state. When Logan returned home, he found Mary had recovered, but the child was getting worse and passed away in September. Mary bore the brunt of the devastation and begged Logan not to go back to the circuit, but he went anyway. She wrote to him that, "Politics, if you will allow, can destroy our happiness together. It will rob you of all domestic feelings and make you miserable except when in the society of men engaged in the discussion of political subjects." But politics wouldn't stop for Logan. In 1858, the Democratic congressman from his district decided not to run and named Logan his successor. Mary's mind changed about Logan's political aspirations, namely because she felt that being a U.S. congressman would give them more time together, rather than him being on the circuit. Logan and Mary began to travel around the state campaigning for Logan and other Democrats, particularly Stephen A. Douglas, running for a U.S. Senate seat from Illinois. Douglas was running against Abraham Lincoln, a one-time U.S. congressman and former state legislature, and now a prominent lawyer in the state. Lincoln and Douglas agreed to a set of debates all over Illinois, and 2 of them would be in Egypt, at Jonesboro and Alton. Logan would be at both of those debates, if nothing else, to gain political prestige from Douglas and for Douglas to get more votes from Egypt because of his association with Logan. After the Jonesboro debate, Douglas traveled to Benton, the Logan's hometown, where he made an impressionable speech to gather a crowd. Logan continued to travel with Douglas while he was in Egypt. In September, the Republicans finally put an active candidate against Logan, named D.L. Phillips. On the campaign trail, Logan argued that the Republicans were in league with abolitionists, and if the Republicans got elected, then a mass migration of African Americans would enter the state, specifically Egypt, because of its close proximity to the slave states of Kentucky and Missouri. One newspaper described Logan's campaigning. "Logan is a popular speaker and seems to have espoused, certainly so far as this district is concerned, the popular cause. In him abolitionism finds a foe, who will be satisfied only with war to the knife and knife to the hilt. His hate for that creed is bitter, and no man knows how to evince a bitter spirit more completely than John A. Logan." The Alton debate was held, and Logan was in attendance, but the benefactor of Douglas's presence was the Democrat running in that district. On November 2nd, Election Day, Douglas won the Senate seat, and Logan handedly won the congressional seat. Logan got 15,878 votes, as opposed to the Republican candidate that got 2,976. He won all but one county in the district, and in Johnson County he won 1,158 to 6. However, the session didn't start until December 1859, so he had to wait a year to take office, so he began to ride the circuit. That winter, Mary gave Logan good news. They were going to have another child. By the fall, they had their new child, a girl named Dorothy. The child was too small to stand the trip to Washington, so Logan had to go on without his wife, but he promised to send for her as soon as possible. As he traveled to Washington, he made a stop at Harper's Ferry. It had been less than a month since John Brown's raid on that town. Logan wrote to his wife, "There is more danger of a rupture in this government now than there has ever been before." In Congress, the first order of business was to elect a Speaker of the House, but since no major party held a majority, it became a fight. During it, William Kellogg stood up and accused Douglas of conspiring with Horace Greeley, the editor of the New York Tribune, to get Republican voters to vote for Douglas. During the accusations, Logan got up to speak, saying, "I tell the gentleman now, since he has refused this morning to bring forward his proof, that from this time forth I shall never notice it. I scorn to notice it any further, and the reason for it is this. I made a charge once in the legislature of the state of Illinois, and I stood up and did prove it, when called upon for proof, and did not shrink from responsibility, and like a spaniel cower." After the heated words, Kellogg and Logan rushed at one another, but their respective sides held them back from landing any blows. After the near scuffle, Logan continued, "Every fugitive slave that has been arrested in Illinois, or in any of the western states, and I call Illinois a western state, for I am ashamed longer to call it a northern state, has been made by Democrats. In Illinois, the Democrats have all that work to do. You call it the dirty work of the Democratic Party to catch slaves for the Southern people. We are willing to perform that dirty work. I do not consider it disgraceful to perform, dirty or not dirty, which is in accordance with the laws of the land and the Constitution of the country." From that day on, the Republican press in Illinois called him Dirty Work Logan. When asked if he would support a Democratic nominee in 1860 whose views on slavery differed from Douglas, Logan answered, "I am now about 28 years of age." He was actually 33. "I was born a Democrat, and all my life I have learned to believe that the Democratic Party in National Convention never do wrong." Applause and laughter from the Democratic benches and galleries. "I have never known the Democratic Party in National Convention to endorse a platform that was not consistent with my views. I came here as a Democrat, and I expect to support a Democrat. I may differ with the gentleman on this side of the House in reference to issues that are past, but God knows that I have differed with the other side from my childhood, and with that side I will never affiliate so long as I have breath in my body." The deadlock over the speakership continued on into December. Mary asked her husband to come home for Christmas, but Logan explained that if he left before a speaker was chosen, he would be charged in the Illinois papers with neglect of duty. So he must stay. Mary asked him about the possibility of disunion, to which Logan wrote, "I hope and pray that such may never be the case. I don't as yet apprehend danger of such a thing at any time soon, but if these troubles continue, the destruction at some day is inevitable." After numerous votes and withdrawing of candidates, the Republicans finally got a majority by putting forward William Pennington of New Jersey. It was February 1st, and the long debate over the speakership had finally ended. Logan's first few months in Congress were uneventful except for his part in the speakership debate. He tried to get a bill put forward to reorganize the district courts of southern Illinois, but the speaker wouldn't recognize him. His anger came out in the debate over the Utah Territory and polygamy, where he proposed dividing the territory in half, thinking that the Mormons couldn't have a majority in that instance. When Congress discussed outlawing polygamy in the territories, the Democrats, including Logan, balked at the thought of outlawing it, not because they were in favor of polygamy, but because they feared it would set the precedent for outlawing slavery in the territories. Soon the Democratic National Convention would be held in Charleston, South Carolina, to vote on a candidate for the presidency in 1860. Logan and fellow Illinois Democrats left Washington for South Carolina, determined to nominate Stephen A. Douglas for that position.